The wind screamed along the canyon's edge, dragging dust through the crowd like a serpent, slithering through the brittle silence that had settled over them. Men and women of Eden Creek stood at the cliff's rim, boots planted in the cracked dirt, hats held tight to heads bowed more from discomfort than respect. A rough hemp rope twisted in the fingers of Sheriff Wyatt Crane, thick-jawed and eagle-eyed, his gray coat flapping with the wind like a preacher's robe, though his gospel was law-soaked in personal vengeance. And at the center of it all, with blood dried against her temple and her dress torn from the struggle, stood Mara Lane. Her bare feet shifted dangerously close to the edge. The rocks beneath her were slick with dust, and the yawning drop below pulsed like a second heartbeat, promising erasure. Her hands were bound tight behind her, wrists raw. A split lip stained her chin red. Her eyes, however, were not pleading. They were defiant, wild as a caged horse that refused to break. "You all know what's brought us here," the sheriff called out, raising his voice above the moan of the wind. "This woman broke the law, laid down with a man not her husband, birthed shame, and refused a righteous path when offered." The crowd murmured like cattle before a stampede. Some eyes avoided hers. Others watched hungrily, eager for the spectacle. No one stepped forward. Mara swallowed, jaw tight. "There was no child," she said. Her voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. He died." Crane's expression didn't waver. "Dead or alive, you still laid with a man unwed. You still denied the sheriff's offer to make it right." "You mean your offer," she spat. He moved fast, faster than anyone expected. His hand cracked across her face and she staggered. A gasp ran through the crowd, but no one moved. No one challenged the law. "Enough," Crane growled. "Justice don't wait for sinners to find their manners." The rope slid over his hand. He tied the noose slowly, with reverent deliberation. Each twist tightened the knot, as though securing not just her fate, but some deep fury inside him. Behind his eyes, there was something more than righteousness. It was personal. Mara had humiliated him when she refused his proposal, had turned down his salvation, with spit on her lips and fire in her words. He'd offered her protection. She'd given him defiance. Now he was taking everything. She remembered the proposal. How he'd cornered her behind the chapel, his hand on her hip like a man already claiming what wasn't his. How he'd said, "A woman like you's got no place without a man. You'll end up under dirt or in chains." Her laughter had cut him deep. Now she was paying the price. A town elder, thin, shaking, stepped forward. "Wyatt, maybe we oughta." "She's had her trial," Crane said. "Ain't no mercy in Scripture for whores who defy the law of men and God." Mara's mouth twisted. "You don't know a damn thing about God." He raised the noose. "Wait." The voice rang out, sharp and unpolished, like a shovel striking rock. The crowd turned. From the back, a man pushed through. He was broad-shouldered, clothes ragged with dust and years of hard living. His boots thudded heavily with each step. Cole McCrae. A name few whispered these days. A rancher once, now mostly forgotten. His land dried out, wife buried under a sycamore, future scattered like ash. No one expected to see him again, much less here. Crane squinted. "You got business here, McCrae?" Cole stepped to the cliff's rim, between Mara and the drop. His voice came low but steady. "This ain't justice, Wyatt. This is murder dressed up in Scripture. She broke the law. Then take her to trial and crossbone. Let a real court see her. The law don't stretch that far." Cole's eyes narrowed. "No, but your grudge does." For a moment, the wind was the only thing speaking. Mara looked at this man, this stranger who now stood between her and death, and wondered what in God's name he was doing. He didn't know her. He didn't know her a thing. "I ain't asking for mercy," she muttered to him. "Good," Cole said without looking back. "I'm not offering it." The sheriff's hand hovered near his pistol. "Step aside. You'll have to shoot me to do it." That hung there, daring him. Then a second voice, thin, female, whimpered from the crowd. "We shouldn't be doing this." Another man turned his head. The murmurs shifted, a subtle but growing tremor underfoot. Crane's nostrils flared. He could feel it, the edge of control slipping. "She made her choice," he barked louder now, "and you all saw it. She bore a bastard and refused lawful marriage. We got to make an example." Cole turned to the crowd. "How many of you have lost someone? Wife, brother, child?" He pointed to the canyon. "This ain't justice. This is about a man wounded in pride, not in law." The people didn't cheer. They didn't riot. But some lowered their eyes. A few turned away. Crane knew he was losing them. He bared his teeth. "You want to save her, McCrae? Fine. But know this, she's marked. Ain't a town within 50 miles that'll take her now. She walks with shame. Cole's voice was dry as desert bone. So do I. He cut the rope from Mara's wrists with a single clean flick of his knife. Her hands dropped. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Then came the gunshot. Crane had drawn, furious, and fired wide. Dust exploded near Cole's feet. Cole's pistol was already in his hand. Next one hits, he said. And I don't miss. They stood like that, two broken men drawn into a war of wills. Until Crane, red-faced and seething, shoved his gun back into its holster. Get out of my town, he hissed. Cole turned. Gladly. He placed a hand on Mara's back, firm but not forceful. She hesitated only a breath before following. They walked through the crowd in silence. No one blocked them. No one met their eyes. By the time they reached the edge of Eden Creek, the sun had slipped behind the hills, dragging long shadows across the earth. You're a damn fool, Mara said, breaking the silence. Cole didn't argue. Why'd you do it? She asked. He glanced at her. Had a sister once. Her name was June. They hanged her for something she didn't do. Thought maybe this time I'd pull the trigger on fate before it finished loading. Mara said nothing. They kept walking. Two outcasts walking into a land that wanted neither of them. Back at the cliff, Sheriff Crane watched the dust settle. He turned his face toward the darkening sky. Let 'em run, he muttered. They won't get far. And in the shadows nearby, another figure stepped away from the rocks, his face hidden beneath a slouch hat and a long duster. He had no badge, but his revolvers gleamed in the twilight. A bounty man with no cause but coin. He didn't speak. He just watched the direction they'd gone, and smiled. Some stories end at the cliff's edge. This one was just getting started. The sky had begun to bruise with twilight when Mara and Cole crested the ridge beyond Eden Creek, silence trailing behind them like dust from their horses' hooves. The animal, an aging sorrel with ribs showing and a gait grown uneven, carried their weight without complaint, but Mara could feel each jolt of motion in her spine, her legs cramping from the strain. Cole rode behind, one arm braced loosely around her waist, the other holding the reins. His touch wasn't possessive. It was steady. Practical. She hated how comforting it was. They rode until the light dimmed into purple haze and the desert opened into a narrow gulch, shaded by ancient stone and bone-dry brush. There, without ceremony, Cole dismounted and helped her down. We'll rest here, he said, already moving to unsaddle the horse. Water nearby. Coyotes too. Keep a fire low. Mara sank to the ground, her wrists throbbing where the rope had rubbed raw. Her legs gave out before she meant to sit. The ache in her muscles had nothing on the burning in her chest, though. The kind of pain that came from being kept alive when every part of her expected to die. You didn't have to do it, she muttered, watching as Cole struck a match and lit a tight coil of twigs. Could have let the sheriff toss me over and called it mercy. Cole didn't look up. Didn't do it for mercy. Then why? He paused. The fire caught, crackling low between them. Shadows danced up his face, cutting deep lines into already weathered skin. His voice came quiet. Because men like Wyatt Crane think they can shape women into whatever suits them. If he'd done that to my sister, I'd never forgive myself. Mara turned away, jaw clenched. And what happened to her? Cole didn't answer right away. He pulled a dented flask from his coat and took a sip, then offered it to her. She took it, drank. Whiskey bit deep and warm, searing through the tension in her chest. She got taken, he finally said. Accused of thieving from a judge's wagon. She didn't matter. Folks believed it, 'cause she was poor, stubborn, unmarried. Like you. So she was hanged. He nodded once, not looking at her. I was too late. The silence stretched, brittle as glass. Mara stared into the fire, letting it pull her thoughts under. She hadn't cried in days. Not when they tied her up. Not when the preacher turned away. Not when the baby came too soon and too quiet to live. But now, sitting across from a stranger who had no reason to help her, she felt it, the terrible, slow unraveling of her insides. I named him, she whispered. Cole glanced up. My boy. I named him Samuel. I only held him for a minute before they took him. Said he wasn't proper. Said he didn't count. Cole's voice was gravel. He counted. The words hit harder than any sermon ever had. The fire crackled. The desert night drew tight around them, full of unseen eyes and shifting winds. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote howled high and lonesome. Mara curled her knees to her chest and tucked her chin between them. Cole lay back in the dirt, hat over his eyes. Get some sleep. We ride early. She didn't sleep, not really. But she closed her eyes, and for now that was enough. They rode again with the sunrise at their backs, the world painted in shades of fire and gold. Cole didn't talk much. He chewed a piece of jerky, offered her some, and guided the horse down into a dry wash that twisted westward. The road was barely a path, flanked by brittle sagebrush and rock formations shaped like broken teeth. By noon Mara's lips were cracked, and her thoughts drifted like heat waves. She pulled her shawl tight to shield from the sun, but it barely helped. Cole didn't complain, though sweat soaked the back of his shirt. He had a kind of patience about him, not kind exactly but calm. Grounded. Like someone used to watching everything he cared about fade away, and choosing to keep walking anyway. They reached the remnants of a burned-out cabin around midday. Charred logs still marked the outline of the structure. A crooked chimney stood like a gravestone. Cole dismounted first, helping Mara down as she winced at the stiffness in her joints. "This used to be a line shack," he said, scanning the ruins. "We'll rest. Water's close." He led her behind the hill where a spring still trickled, faint but clear. Mara drank greedily, washing the grime from her face, hands, arms. She looked at her reflection in the water, a face she barely recognized. Hollow cheeks. Soot-smeared skin. Eyes dark from too little sleep and too much remembering. Later they sat beneath the half-collapsed frame of what had once been a porch. Cole carved a sliver of wood with a knife so worn its handle was nearly smooth. He didn't offer explanations. He didn't need to. Mara watched him work, then said, "You got a family?" "Had." He didn't look up. "Wife died 4 years back. Fever. No money for a doctor. Land went dry after that. Herd thinned out. Eventually had to sell most of it just to eat." She nodded slowly. "That why you left Eden Creek?" "I didn't leave," he said. "I was forgotten." The wind shifted, tugging at Mara's hair. "Seems like you should be angry." "I am." "Then why not shoot him?" "Crane. You had your chance." Cole stopped carving. "Because if I'd killed him there, he'd have gone out a martyr. Folks need time to see what he really is. Let him rot under his own shadow." Mara smiled faintly, almost bitter. "You talk like someone who's waited a long time for revenge." He looked up, then meeting her gaze. "Revenge doesn't fix anything. But sometimes it clears the way." They sat in silence again, the fire from the wreckage long cooled, but its ashes still whispering. Far off, a shape moved on the horizon. A single rider, slow, deliberate. Cole stiffened. "We need to go." Mara followed his gaze. The rider wore a wide-brimmed hat, long coat, no visible weapon, but that didn't mean much. In the west, danger never announced itself. It waited. It watched. They mounted and moved fast, riding down into the gullies, using the terrain as cover. Cole didn't speak. His jaw was tight, eyes constantly scanning the ridgelines. Mara's heart pounded, the breath caught in her throat with every hoofbeat. By nightfall the rider was gone, or at least no longer visible. They made camp in a narrow ravine beneath overhanging stone. No fire this time. Just stars above and cold rock below. Mara couldn't sleep. "I keep thinking," she said quietly, "that I should have jumped myself before they had the chance." Cole's voice came slow. "Why didn't you?" She hesitated. "Because I was angry." "That's good." "No," she said, "it wasn't strength. I just wanted to spite them. Wanted them to see me live." Cole turned on his side. "You think that's not strength?" The question settled over her like dust, getting into places she didn't want to look. In the morning, they reached the edge of a canyon where Cole's ranch lay nestled in a dry valley. The land was tired, fence posts fallen, barn half collapsed, weeds claiming everything. A few chickens scratched near the gate. A mule watched them pass like a bored sentinel. Cole dismounted. "It's not much." "It's more than a noose," Mara replied. He chuckled just once. Dry and short but not unkind. "You can stay if you want. Ain't many who pass through anymore." "And if I don't?" He shrugged. "Your choice." That caught her off guard. So many men in her life had talked about duty, about what was owed or expected. Cole didn't offer obligation. Just space. Just soil, broken though it was. She stepped inside the cabin, ducking under a crooked doorframe. The interior was dim but dry. A cot sat in one corner, a rusted stove in the other. Dust coated everything. Yet it was a place no one had tried to drag her out of. That alone made it more than any church or town square she'd ever stood in. Cole stayed outside, repairing a fence post with slow, deliberate strikes of his hammer. Mara watched him from the doorway, arms crossed. "You're not what I expected," she said. He didn't look up. "Most folks aren't." She leaned against the frame. You really think I can make a life here? He drove the nail in with a final blow. I don't think anything. But if you decide to, you won't have to fight alone. For a long moment, Mara stood there, the wind brushing past her like a whisper. Then she nodded just once. Behind them, far beyond the horizon, Sheriff Crane stared at a blood-stained map and marked a trail. He wasn't done. Not yet. But neither was she. The morning sun lit the horizon like a burning brand, painting the cracked earth gold as Mara stepped barefoot into the corral. The boards were splintered, some held together with rusted wire, others leaning like tired soldiers. The mule inside blinked at her lazily, unimpressed. She'd never worked livestock before. Never had cause to. Yet she rolled up her sleeves, gripped the shovel, and began clearing the old straw, not because she knew how, but because she needed something to push against. Cole had left before dawn, muttering something about checking the southern ridge fence. He hadn't asked her to do anything. He never did. That was the trouble. In a world that was always demanding, always taking, the quiet of this place, the way it waited on her decisions, felt heavier than chains. Flies buzzed around the stale muck. Her hands blistered within the first hour. The mule eventually shifted closer, nudging her shoulder with its nose. She blinked, startled. "Don't expect conversation," she muttered. "You're already more polite than most." When the corral was cleared, she dropped the shovel and sat against the fence, chest heaving, sweat soaking her shirt. Her back ached. Her fingers stung. But beneath the pain was a strange satisfaction, a sense, however small, that she was part of something she could control. Out here, no one was branding her a sinner. No one was setting ropes around her neck. The thought made her smile. A small one. Crooked. She was halfway to the cabin when the shot rang out. She froze. Another shot, closer now. Sure. Cling. Not random. Her heart thundered. Grabbing the rifle Cole kept by the doorframe, she loaded it with shaking hands. She didn't know how many rounds were in the chamber, but she knew how to hold it, how to keep her back low and her eyes steady. Her father had taught her that much before the fever took him. The third shot echoed from the ridge line. She ran. The land rolled in jagged hills and gullies, dry brush scraping her legs as she scrambled upward. The sun made it hard to see. Dust kicked up with every step. But she kept climbing until she reached the edge of a bluff and dropped flat. Below, Cole stood facing two men on horseback. They weren't lawmen, not the kind that wore badges at least. One was tall and wiry, his coat long and dark, the color of a storm cloud. The other was broader, face hidden beneath a red scarf. Their horses were well fed, their saddles clean. They didn't look like drifters. They looked like hunters. Cole didn't have his gun drawn, but his hand hovered near it. "You boys look lost," he said. The taller man tipped his hat. "Just following a trail. Heard someone was harboring a wanted woman out here." Cole didn't flinch. "Don't see any law with you. We carry justice where it's needed. Sheriff Crane sends his regards." Mara's grip tightened on the rifle. Her stomach churned. She knew this was coming. Deep down she always had. Wyatt Crane was a man who didn't let go. Not pride. Not insults. Not women who made him look weak. The broader man dismounted and started walking. "No need to make this hard," he called. "We just want the girl." "She's not here," Cole said. "She was." "Then you're late." The broad man stopped. "Maybe. Maybe not." The tall one nodded. "You sure you want to stake your life on her, McCrae? You've already lost everything else." Cole didn't answer. His silence said more than 1,000 arguments could. The broad man moved again. Mara didn't wait. She stood, aimed, and fired. The shot cracked through the canyon, echoing sharp and cold. The man staggered back, hit in the leg. He shouted, falling against his horse. The animal spooked, kicking dust. Cole reacted instantly, drawing and firing at the tall man, who spun and returned fire. Bullets sliced the air. Cole dove behind a boulder. The tall man's horse reared, screaming. Mara reloaded, hands trembling. She fired again, missed. The tall man wheeled his horse, retreating toward the ridge, shouting for his partner. The injured one crawled into the saddle with help, bleeding and furious. They vanished over the rise in a cloud of hoofbeats and dust. It was over in seconds. Mara scrambled down to Cole, heart racing, rifle still clutched to her chest. He was crouched, panting, knuckles white around his pistol. "You all right?" she asked. "Could have warned me you could shoot." "I wasn't sure until I pulled the trigger." He gave her a half-smile, breathless. "Good instincts." They didn't linger. Cole packed what little ammunition they had and buried the spent casings. Mara wiped her palms on her shirt, trying not to shake. "They'll be back," she said. He nodded. With more. They rode out before nightfall, carrying only what they could strap to the saddle. The land behind them faded into shadow as the stars came out one by one, cold and sharp. Mara didn't look back. If she did, she wasn't sure she'd be able to keep moving. They camped near a dry stream bed, the moon slicing silver across the sand. Cole didn't speak for a long while. He just sat with his back against a boulder, eyes scanning the dark. I thought I could outrun it, Mara said finally. Cole looked over. This past, she said. Crane. The shame. All of it. You can't outrun something that never belonged to you. She blinked. What? He shifted, leaning forward. What they did to you, the judgment, the branding, the fear, that's their sickness, not yours. You just carried the weight of it. Mara stared at the fire. I don't feel strong. I feel like glass half the time. So what? He said. Glass cuts. She looked at him, surprised. Then she laughed, quiet, tired, but real. That night, sleep came easier. The ground was hard. The future uncertain. But the fear wasn't quite as loud anymore. By the third day, they reached an old railway station long abandoned, its wood faded to gray and metal rails rusted red. Cole knew the place from his cattle driving days, said the trains hadn't come in 5 years. But there was shelter and water and distance from Eden Creek. They set up camp inside the station's shell, scavenging what they could. Mara found a tin box of old train tokens beneath a floorboard. She kept one, slipping it into her boot like a charm. Cole repaired a broken window and hung a blanket over the opening. We'll rest here for a few days, he said. See if the trail behind us goes quiet. Mara stood by the door, looking out across the barren stretch of land. You think Crane's done? Cole didn't answer right away. No. But I think we're starting something he can't control anymore. She nodded slowly. The wind pushed through the broken beams, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. Mara wasn't sure what lay ahead. But she knew this. She was no longer someone waiting to be judged. No longer a woman surviving in the space left behind by someone else's power. She was choosing now. Each breath, each step. And somewhere out there, Wyatt Crane was losing ground. That was enough for now. The morning haze clung to the dry earth like breath on glass. Mara woke to the rattle of tin, the whisper of boots over gravel. She didn't move, not at first. Years of danger had taught her the value of stillness. She eased her fingers toward the revolver beside her bedroll, breath caught in her throat. Then came a familiar voice. Easy. It's just me. Cole's silhouette leaned against the doorway of the station, the dawn painting the sky behind him in a bruise of violet and rust. He had 2 rabbits slung over his shoulder and a grim look in his eye. You were gone a while, she said, sitting up. I doubled back to the old pass. Found tracks. Fresh ones. Her stomach dropped. How many? Hard to say. 3, maybe 4 riders. Not Sheriff Crane yet, but he'll come. These are scouts. She looked at the tin cup beside her. Cold coffee. Her hand shook as she lifted it. Not from the caffeine. From the weight of inevitability. What do we do? She asked. He crouched beside her, unrolling his maps. If we head east toward the sandstone arches, we'll hit Red Bluff in 3 days. It's not much of a town, but it's got a telegraph office. I've got a friend there who still owes me a favor. Mara studied the lines of ink and paper, the path laid out like veins across skin. You think Crane will wait? No. But he's careful. He'll let the scouts report back. Buy us time if we move fast. Mara didn't need time. She needed certainty. But she knew better than to ask for it. By midday they were packed and riding hard. The sun bore down on their shoulders, merciless and hot. Dust rose from their horses' hooves in gritty clouds that stuck to their tongues and lashes. They said little. Each mile burned into memory. Mara didn't ask who Cole's friend was. She didn't want to know yet. Not until they made it. That evening, they camped beneath a ridge of stone that looked like a broken crown, jagged and bleeding rust. Cole gathered dry wood while Mara checked the perimeter. The wind whispered low and full of secrets. She crouched behind a fallen log and peered into the distance. For a moment, just a flicker, she thought she saw movement, too slow for wind, too silent for animal. She didn't mention it when she returned to camp. Just tightened the strap on her holster and kept her firelight low. Cole roasted the rabbits without flair but with practiced hands. She watched him work, the way his brow furrowed slightly when he focused, the way his shoulders curled protectively when the night closed in. You always this quiet? She asked as they ate. He glanced up. You always this curious? She smirked. Touché. He leaned back, chewing. Used to talk more. When there were people around who wanted to listen. Friends? Family. What happened? He shrugged, a motion that looked practiced. Lost my brother in a fire. Lost the ranch soon after. After that, just kept riding. Fire? He nodded, looking into the flames. Dry summer. Wind kicked up one night. Sparks from a lantern. By the time we saw it, half the barn was gone. My brother went in to save the horses. Didn't come out. Mara felt the quiet settle between them like dust on old wood. Heavy. Familiar. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at her. Not with pity but something else, recognition. Me too. They said nothing more that night. Sleep didn't come easy. Mara lay with one hand on her revolver, ears tuned to every sound outside their camp. Sometime past midnight she heard a twig snap. Her eyes shot open. She nudged Cole, who was already awake. They moved silently, fanning out. Mara circled wide, rifle raised, breath tight. Then she saw him, one of the scouts. Thin, young, maybe no older than 20. He crouched near their supplies, knife in hand, eyes darting nervously. She stepped on a stone. He turned. Don't move, she said, leveling her rifle. He froze. I wasn't gonna take nothing, I swear. You were armed. He dropped the knife. Cole stepped in behind him, pistol raised. Who sent you? The boy trembled. We didn't know it was you. Crane said she was dangerous. Said you were a kidnapper. Said she had to be brought back before she poisoned more people. Mara laughed, a short, humorless sound. You believe that? Cole asked. The boy hesitated. I don't know what to believe. Mara lowered her gun. What's your name? Wes. You ever seen justice, Wes? Not law. Justice. He shook his head. She nodded. Didn't think so. They let him go before sunrise. Send him back without his horse. Wes wouldn't walk far before someone found him, and by then their tracks would be washed away by the wind. Mara didn't feel good about it, but she didn't feel guilty either. The next day they reached the edge of Red Bluff. It wasn't much more than a dusty row of buildings and a saloon with one door hanging off its hinge. The telegraph office leaned to one side, the paint faded to the color of old paper. But it had what they needed. Cole dismounted stiffly and handed Mara the reins. Wait here. I'll send the wire. She watched him disappear inside. Her horse shifted nervously. Something about the town felt off. Too quiet. Too still. Like the whole place was holding its breath. Cole emerged 10 minutes later, his face tight. Message is sent. Now we wait. For who? A man named Harlan Drew. Used to run cattle with me near Blackwater Ridge. If he still owes me like I think he does, we'll have a wagon by morning. Mara nodded, but her gut twisted. Cole? What is it? Something's wrong. They didn't have time to answer. A voice rang out from the far end of the street. Cole. Familiar. Mara. She turned. Sheriff Crane sat atop a black stallion, 4 armed men flanking him. His badge gleamed like a lie on his chest. His eyes were pale blue, flat as a sky without clouds. He looked exactly as she remembered, too polished for a place this rough, too self-assured. You've run far enough, he said. Cole stepped in front of her. You don't have jurisdiction here. Crane laughed. You think that matters to me? Mara pushed past Cole, face set. You come all this way to drag me back? Make an example? I came to restore order, Crane said. The people deserve justice. I gave birth to a child, she said, and refused your proposal. That's not a crime. In Eden Creek it is. She drew her revolver. Then to hell with Eden Creek. Crane narrowed his eyes. You'd shoot me here? In front of witnesses. There's no one left to care, Cole said. Tension snapped like a drawn bow. The wind picked up, swirling dust between them. One of Crane's men shifted in his saddle. Then a wagon rolled in from the west, drawn by 2 mules. A tall man stood at the reins, coat flapping behind him like a flag. Harlan Drew. He pulled up beside Mara and Cole, rifle resting casually across his lap. Heard somebody needed a ride. Crane's jaw tightened. Harlan glanced at him. You gonna start a war in front of a telegraph line, Sheriff? No one moved. No one spoke. Then Crane spat, turned his horse. You can run, Mara. But you'll answer one day. She didn't flinch. Maybe. But not to you. He rode off, men in tow, their silhouettes swallowed by the rising sun. Mara let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Cole looked at her. You still want to keep running? She stared down the empty road. No. I want to fight. Just need to decide where. He smiled. Then let's start with getting somewhere safe. The wagon rumbled across dry plains as dawn crept slow and golden over the horizon. Mara sat beside Cole, her fingers tracing the smooth edge of the train token hidden in her coat pocket. Harlan handled the reins in silence, eyes scanning the land like a man who had seen too many ambushes to ever relax. They rode east toward the hills near Juniper Ridge, a place Cole said had caves and high ground, the kind of terrain you could defend if you had to. They would have to. Crane's not letting this go, Mara said quietly. Cole didn't look at her. I know. You think he'll wait to make it legal? He never did before. Behind them, the dust cloud of Red Bluff had long since vanished. But Mara could feel Crane gaining, always gaining, like a storm just out of sight but close enough to smell. The man was relentless. Not because of law. Not even revenge. Because he believed himself right. The kind of belief you couldn't reason with, couldn't outwit. You could only outlast it. Or stop it. By the second day they reached the highlands. Jagged stone jutted from the earth in sharp angles, shadows falling long across the trail. They made camp in the mouth of a narrow gorge, the walls steep and tight enough to bottle sound. Harlan made a fire without a word. Cole unpacked the rifles and started setting up tripwires and lookout points. Mara watched them, uneasy. You two fought wars before? Cole smirked. Harlan did. I just had a stubborn streak in a rifle. She forced a laugh, but it didn't quite land. That night, sleep came in fits. The wind howled through the stone, a coyote barked somewhere close, and Mara couldn't stop thinking about the girl she used to be, naive enough to believe a man like Crane would take no for an answer. She hadn't thought herself brave. Just desperate. But maybe that was the same thing. At sunrise, Harlan returned from a ridge patrol, his expression stony. Riders, he said. 6 or 7. Hard to count in the light. Cole tightened the straps on his boots. Crane? Hard to say. Could be scouts again. Mara stood. Then we don't wait. We take the fight to them. Both men looked at her. Cole's eyes softened. You sure? She nodded. If I run now, I'll be running the rest of my life. They spent the morning laying traps, tripwire across narrow paths, rockfalls ready to be kicked loose, brush soaked in oil near choke points. Harlan scouted routes of retreat. Cole set up his repeater rifle on a ledge overlooking the gorge. Mara took a shotgun and climbed the opposite wall, finding a perch that gave her a clear view of the trail below. It wasn't courage she felt. It was purpose. Clear. Sure. By noon the riders came. 7 of them, dust trailing behind like smoke. Crane rode at the front, clean as ever, hat unblemished, coat sharp, boots polished. As if the dirt of the world refused to stick to him. The men behind him looked meaner, mercenaries, not deputies. These weren't here for justice. They were here for blood. Crane raised a hand, signaling them to halt at the base of the gorge. Mara, he called, voice carrying in the wind. This doesn't have to end badly. Come with me now and we'll let your friends go. You have my word. Mara stepped forward on the ledge, shotgun slung over her arm. You said that before. Right before you tried to hang me. You were misled. Things got out of hand. She laughed hard. You tied a noose yourself. His face darkened, but his tone stayed syrup smooth. You were a threat to the order. To virtue. I was a girl who said no. A tense silence fell. Then Crane drew his pistol and fired. The bullet missed wide, ricocheting off stone. But it was enough. Harlan squeezed the trigger from his perch. One of Crane's men dropped, screaming. Cole fired next, catching another in the shoulder. Chaos erupted, horses screaming, gunfire cracking like thunder. Mara ducked low and fired twice, hitting a man who dismounted and tried to climb the rocks. Crane wheeled his horse behind cover, barking orders. His men scattered, trying to flank. Mara moved fast, sliding down the ridge to where Cole crouched. 2 coming up the side trail. He nodded and tossed her a revolver. Cover me. She leaned out, fired 3 quick shots. One of the men dropped. The other ducked behind a boulder and returned fire, grazing her shoulder. She hissed but kept firing. The trap worked. One of the mercenaries triggered a tripwire and got buried in a small rockslide. Another tried to cross the oil-soaked brush and Cole lit it with a match. Flames burst upward. The man screamed and ran back into gunfire. The tide began to turn. Then Crane emerged again, calm amid the chaos. He raised a long-barreled revolver and took aim. At Cole. Mara screamed his name, but the shot came fast. Cole staggered back, hit just above the hip. Stay down, she shouted, dragging him behind a boulder. Blood soaked his shirt. He gritted his teeth. I'm fine. Just a graze. But it wasn't. Not really. Crane advanced slowly now, his men either down or retreating. He moved like a man who had waited too long to claim something he thought was his. "You always had spirit," he called. "Too much for your own good." Mara stood, revolver trembling in her hand. "You can't win this." "I already have. You just haven't realized it." She stepped forward. "You think power makes you right. But this is the end of your story, not mine. You think killing me fixes anything? No. But it stops you." He fired first. She dove sideways, the bullet ripping through her coat. She rolled, came up, fired twice. One missed. The second hit his thigh. He stumbled, eyes wide with disbelief. She advanced, slow and steady, gun still raised. "You branded me. Made me beg. Left me for dead." He dropped to one knee, gripping his wound. "I should kill you," she said. He looked up, bloodied and sneering. "Then do it." Her finger tightened. Then she stopped. "No," she said. "That'd make me like you." He snarled, lunging. But Harlan tackled him from the side, slamming his head against a rock. Crane went still. The silence that followed was thick. Final. Cole groaned behind her and she rushed to him. He was pale but alive. "We did it," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. Harlan stood nearby, wiping blood from his brow. "He'll live if we bind him. Send word to the marshal out west." Mara nodded. They spent the next hour tending wounds, binding Crane's hands, and gathering what supplies they could salvage from the battle. The sun hung high above them now, indifferent to their pain, but warm in a way Mara hadn't felt in a long while. That night, with Cole resting near the fire and Crane tied to a post beneath the stars, Harlan poured 2 tin cups of whiskey and handed one to Mara. "To surviving," he said. She raised hers. "To choosing." They clinked the cups and drank. Mara stood later, watching the stars spin slowly overhead. She thought of the girl who'd knelt in the dust weeks ago, rope around her neck, fire in her belly. That girl had been dying. This woman was living. Cole stirred behind her. "What now?" he asked. She turned to him, firelight in her eyes. "Now we build something worth keeping. No more running. No more hiding. Just living." He nodded, sleep heavy in his eyes. She looked east toward the land still untouched by Crane's reach. Whatever came next, it would be hers. Made with her hands. Built on her terms. And she would never be silent again. As they climbed into the wagon, the wind shifted. Not gentle. Not harsh. But filled with change. And in the dust and silence that followed, Mara felt something she hadn't in a long time.